Okay, we need to talk about the dinoflagellates. So, these are some pretty interesting little guys. There's about 2,000 species of them, and they're in the phylum Pyrophyta, and they're called the dinoflagellates. Now, it tells you that they're moving by means of flagella, but don't get confused. They are not animal like, they're plant like because they do carry out photosynthesis. So even though they move by means of flagella, they are not in the phylum Sarcomastigophora. Okay, they're very small. They're unicellular, and they have two flagella. The two flagella are unequal length, and they're usually found perpendicular to one another. You can see here, it looks like it's like a medieval weapon or something. They have cell walls made of cellulose, and the cellulose is in plates. And when you look at it underneath the microscope, this is what it looks like, and the plates make it look like it's got armor or something. I think it actually sort of looks like one of those medieval weapons, but this is what they look like underneath the microscope. Now, most of them, there are going to be just very few species. So most of them are photoautotrophic, um, but rarely, and there's very few species that are colorless and they're heterotrophic. So most of them are capable of making their own food. The ones that are photosynthetic have a look to them that is sort of yellowish brown, and that's because they have a large content of the carotenoids as their secondary pigments. Now, their primary pigments are going to be chlorophyll A and C. They don't have chlorophyll B, but the pigments in the carotenoids, the orangish brownish golden look, orange, is what gives them their color. Now, we do have some species, like the ones you see on the left, from the genus Noctiluca, and they are capable of bioluminescence. Now, bioluminescence is a phenomenon that not just the dinoflagellates have. There are many animals that do have this particular property. Most of them are found in very deep water. And there's usually three reasons that an animal is bioluminescent. First of all, they're attracting their prey. They light up, they're very attractive to some other little organism, and as they come close, then they're gobbled up. That's if they're heterotrophic. Another reason would be to find a mate. Now, if it is an animal and it lights up, and there's many fish that do, lighting up is attractive to a lot of the, either opposite mating type, it's attractive, or actually to the opposite sex, and that's a reason. And also, it can ward off predators. It can say, hey, I'm lighting up, get away from me, I'm poisonous, such as something like the blue-ringed octopus, who shows he presents himself as gray unless he's threatened, and then he lights up the blue rings on his tentacles, which means, hey, I'm big and bad and you need to get away from me. So bioluminescence is a phenomenon in which some animals are capable of lighting up. And this is true with some species in the dinoflagellates. Now, there are some species that produce red pigments, and you may have run into this, especially if you go to the Gulf. It's called the red tide, and I don't know if you've ever seen it or not, but what happens is the water, the conditions for them to reproduce is optimal. And so they have this reproductive explosion where they are over reproducing, and the phenomenon gives the water a reddish tint, and that's why it's called the red tide. It's really common in the Gulf, usually between like September and October, maybe sometimes in August. And what's happening is when they overproduce, they die and release a toxin, and that toxin can kill the fish that are swimming in the red tide. Also, if we were to eat any of the shellfish that come out of the red tide or any of the fish that come out of the red tide, those toxins are poison to us as well. Now, the toxins produced by these protists move up the food chain. And so they're moving from the dinoflagellates, which is a protist, into probably krill. They're going to move from krill into clam or oysters, and then they can get into bigger fish. And then, of course, the toxins can actually kill humans. So usually at times in the Gulf, when there's a red tide, it will say, or your waiter in a restaurant may say, there's a red tide, we're not serving this type of fish, because it's usually a type of fish that likes to feed on dinoflagellates. Also, they will close the beaches, and it's not going to be the entire beach. You can actually see it if you're like this, like if you're up on a balcony, you can see it. So it may not stretch the entire beach, but they're certainly going to close that part of the beach in which you see the red tide. So it's not something you want to swim in or eat anything that has been swimming in it. All right, your phylum is Pyrophyta. The common name is the dinoflagellates. They're unicellular. Their pigments, their dominant pigments are A and C, and their accessory pigments in the carotenoids are beta carotene. We get a lot of beta carotene from carrots. Their nutrition, most of them are phototrophs, where they're capable of making their own food. And if you were asked, or if you needed to recognize a particular genus name, Noctiluca would be one.